Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 Candidate Forum for the 5th Legislative District for the State of Washington. This event is presented by the Kiwanis Club of Issaquah and the Issaquah branch of the American Association of University Women and the Issaquah Cable TV Commission. I'm Connie Fletcher, and I'll moderate this forum with Ann Francis Owen. Over the next hour, we'll hear from 5 candidates running for office in the 5th District of the state legislature. This year, Ingrid Anderson and Mark Mullet are running for the Senate. Ken Moninski and Bill Ramos are running for House Position 1, and Lisa Callan is running unopposed for House Position 2. Each candidate will start with a 2-minute statement, and then every opposed candidate will respond to the questions. Those responses will last up to 1 minute. Candidates will see a yellow card after 45 seconds and a red card when no time remains. After the first candidate responds, the opposing candidate will respond, and then the candidate will have another 30 seconds for rebuttal. For the last question, each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to a question from the opposing candidate. And finally, each candidate, opposed or not, will have 1 minute for closing remarks. Going forward, we'll use only first names, so let's get started. Ingrid will give the first opening statement, followed by Mark, Ken, Bill, and Lisa. So Ingrid.
All right. Hello. Thank you. My name is Ingrid Anderson. I'm a mom, a nurse, an advocate for my community. And I'm really excited to be here tonight with Kiwanis because over 20 years ago, when I graduated high school, it was Kiwanis that gave me my first scholarship to go to college. It was a profound moment. It had a big effect on me, and in part was what motivated me to do more for my community to this day. It also is what inspired me to start my own scholarship program from my nurse's salary to local youth, which I've been doing for several years now. I've lived in rural Snoqualmie nearly all my life. I've been lucky enough to live next door to the home where I grew up in and where my parents still live today. And this is where I choose to raise my family. I've spent my years as a nurse caring for our community members in the emergency department, the psychiatric department, and as a sexual assault nurse examiner. I do this because I know the importance of caring for all of our community members, not just some. I know the importance of meeting people where they're at and giving them a voice when they have none. As a nurse for years, I have seen the deep structural flaws in our healthcare system. I understand what is working and what is not working. I also see the implications of good and bad policy and how it translates to the health of our community and sometimes not having health of our community. It's because of these experiences as a nurse and a mom and a daughter and a community member that I decided to run for office. And I know that now, more than ever, we need this experience in Olympia. I started this path when I began advocating for my patients at the bedside, and I took that experience to Olympia, working with representatives to help pass legislation that addressed healthcare reform and much more. I've committed myself to the fundamental idea of helping others and speaking truth to power. And I will be a fierce advocate for our children, our schools, the environment, our healthcare system, and working people and our small businesses. It will be my honor to serve you as your next state senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingrid. Mark?
Thank you, Connie. Thank you, Kiwanis, for hosting this. I won't mention that I'm a member of the Rotary Club. I know it's a friendly competition between those two. And so I think the 5th Legislative District is very unique. I think it's the most in the middle of the political spectrum of all 49 legislative districts. That's what I've always liked about it. And I always self-classified myself in the middle of the political spectrum. And it's a very unique district because when you go down to Black Diamond, that's the only city in King County that voted for Donald Trump in the last election. And you can go out to Carnation where you see farms that makes you feel like you're in the middle of the Midwest. And then you can go to Issaquah where you have the Fortune 500 global headquarters of Costco. And so I think it's a very unique district because you have urban, you have rural, you have Republicans, you have Democrats. At the end of the day, I think it makes us very unique. And I've always been proud to represent the district where I go out of my way to try to listen to the people from all different parts of the district because it is so different. You can't just talk to people in Issaquah. You have to spend a lot of time in Maple Valley and Black Diamond, as well as North Bend and Carnation to try to get that full perspective. And in terms of my life outside the legislature. I own the Ben & Jerry's ice cream store in Issaquah, Zeke's Pizza. I, moved back home. I grew up in Tukwila. I graduated from high school in 1990, and I went away to college. I came back to the Northwest in 2006. I picked Issaquah for two reasons. It was the combination of amazing public schools. I think they have one of the best school districts in the state, and that's what I saw with a lot of our surrounding communities. At the same time, it was the beautiful outdoor scenery, because when you look outside your backyard in the 5th Legislative District, I mean, you're in awe of looking at Mount Si or Mount Rainier or Tiger Mountain. I mean, this is a beautiful place to live, and it's our job to protect that beauty for the next generation. And that's why I'm looking forward to running for office another 4 years, so we can focus on public education, focus on getting our small businesses back to work after the COVID disaster, and focus on making sure we have a beautiful natural environment to pass on to our kids. So thank you very much.
Ken, you're on mute.
Not anymore. Thank you, everybody. It's it's an honor to be here tonight, and I expect that hopefully tonight will be an upgrade from what we saw Tuesday night. I think we're all willing to commit to that. My name is Ken Moninski, and I'm running for state representative in position 1. I'm a Republican candidate. I live in Maple Valley with my wife and 2 daughters, and I'm running because I'm ready to bring the change that we need now to Olympia. As you listen to me and to Representative Ramos and the other candidates talk about the challenges that lie ahead, I want to ask you to consider their voting records, who funds their campaigns, and the commitments they've already made about our future. With the possible exception of Senator Mullet, Representatives Ramos and Cowan and Ingrid Anderson are all funded by the same public employee unions and special interest groups that are going to require more of your hard-earned income to carry forward their agenda. And that agenda seems to me to be higher taxes, larger government, and an ever-increasing control over your life. On the other hand, I'm a small businessman. I own 2 aviation services companies that does business around the globe. I also serve as the treasurer for the Northwest chapter of the Scleroderma Foundation, dealing with a debilitating chronic illness. And again, I've lived in Maple Valley for 10 years, and I believe that we need to bring more balance to Olympia. I'm endorsed by the Association of Washington Business, as well as former Republican representatives Paul Graves, Chad Magendas, and Jay Rodney. You have a choice in this election. Even in position 2, you have a write-in candidate in Corey Bailey who's running. I hope you will cast your vote for a new direction for the future, because the politics of the past can no longer serve the challenges of our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill?
Thank you all very much for having this forum. Many of you already, know me as your state representative, Bill Ramos, and that's because I've lived in the 5th for over 30 years. About half of that in the Snoqualmie Valley, where I worked for the Forest Service, and I was a member of the Chamber of Commerce there. And then the last half here in Issaquah, and I'm a current member of the Chamber here as well. As I got involved with the city here, I was on 3 different city commissions. I was chair of the Human Services Commission. I was also on the Economic Vitality Commission and the Planning and Policy Commission. And doing that work there, people encouraged me to run for Issaquah City Council, which I did in 2015 and got elected there. I was very happy with the work that I did there. 2 of the pieces that were important were acquiring the Bergsma property, and that was protecting green space on the west side of town on Cougar Mountain, and also working with the developer to add 80 units of affordable housing for sale that added to a big chunk of affordable housing for Issaquah. And then with that work, people encouraged me to run for state representative, and I work across the aisle because I do what's best for our district and for the state. An example of that is my carbon sequestration bill, which carbon is very controversial and usually partisan, but it passed unanimously in the House. I'll also continue to work on transportation, as I am on Highway 18, which hopefully will start next year on the construction of the redoing of the interchange at I-90 and Highway 18. And I've been endorsed by many people across the aisle, from teachers to firefighters, your elected officials, city council, mayors, environmental groups. and workers. So I just want to thank you all for taking your valuable time to join us tonight.
Thank you. And Lisa.
Hello, and thank you. Thank you to Kiwanis and the University Women and Issaquah TV for having us tonight and letting me have an opportunity to provide some comments, even though I'm running unopposed. And just want to thank you all for that. You know, I'm a mom, I'm a spouse, I'm an engineer, computer science consultant. I came to the Northwest over, I think it's like 34 years ago to work for Boeing as an engineer, and, you know, worked on the brand new commercial airplanes that were coming in the door and being pushed out to make our aviation industry thrive. And that great opportunity for me led to my ability to have a thriving family and an opportunity to give back to my community and dive deep into what is necessary and needed for every individual in our community to thrive. And in that work, as I dove deep into education, I come from a family of educators, and my background with that, I was able to volunteer deeply in my my son's school and in my community, including Kiwanis, and being able to take part in that as I was raised in that environment as well. I had the great fortune and opportunity to run for the school board, for the Issaquah School Board, and I served on the Issaquah School Board for 5 years. And in that work, you know, there's very little that you don't touch as a school board, elected school board member in a nonpartisan role about what needs to happen to make sure that every child can learn and has the ability to learn. And that is including city infrastructure, it includes growth management, it includes transportation, it includes water and air quality, it includes the reading, writing, and arithmetic basics, people's ability to actually show up to work and be at work and not worry about where their children are and their children's ability to thrive, what their pay is, what the equity is, and that justice around all of that. So when you start diving into all of that policy and that work, you know very well what's starting to happen at the state level and the state's role that is played in every bit of our lives and how that shows up. So my work and my passion and my great opportunity to be elected in 2018 as their state representative in the 5th has given me that chance to continue my passion and the journey on making sure that we have healthy kids, healthy families, and healthy communities. And I look forward to listening to the debate tonight.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And thanks to all of you for introducing yourselves to the audience. Anne, would you start asking the questions?
Thanks, Connie, and welcome to all the candidates. The first question is on the budget, no surprise. Ingrid will take the first response, followed by Mark, then Ingrid with a 30-second rebuttal. And it'll be Ken, Bill, and Ken with the rebuttal. Ingrid, please start. Ingrid, you're muted.
So you said the question was budget, but I didn't.
Sorry, the COVID-19 pandemic left a $4.4 billion hole in the state budget. How should the legislature address this deficit? Are furloughs and layoffs in the cards for state employees? What services are you prepared to cut?
So I think this is something that's on the top of everybody's mind right now, obviously, right? And I think one thing that I'd like to highlight is that the revenue forecast that we had several months ago is already half of what we were expecting it to be, the revenue forecast shortfall. So I think that's something that we really need to look at, is that it's a dynamic thing that we're not completely sure exactly where we're going to be at when we hit our legislative session next year. We also don't know what kind of federal response aid is going to be coming. So I think something we really need to look at is potential scenarios, but we also have to keep in mind that coming in with austerity measures that we did in such as 2008 really did prolong our economic recovery. And so I think it's important that we do not go initially to cutting the most critical services. We need to protect our schools, our healthcare, and some of those foundational things that really help support our communities so that we can open up and have a thriving economy when the time is right. But there's still a lot on the line for how short our budget will be. I think we do need to look at different forms of revenue, and my time is up.
Thanks, Ingrid. Mark?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I think that obviously my hope was to do a special session in June. I thought the first place we should have started was not doing a 3% state employee pay increase. That cost us hundreds of millions of dollars. And I felt that, when you looked at what they were doing in the city of Issaquah, they had to not only lay people off, but people who didn't get laid off, a lot of them took pay reductions, like 5 to 10% pay reductions. And so I thought it was kind of tone deaf for the state to be doing a pay increase while other municipal governments across our state were making difficult decisions. I think in terms of how you budget and prioritize, I think the first thing you do is you don't add any staff unless you're dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. In places where you have to deal with the pandemic, you add staff. In places where you're not dealing with the pandemic, you don't have your normal growth of government like we always seem to experience. And I think if you do that correctly, it'll enable you to make sure you don't cut mental health. That's the place where you cannot shortchange things going forward. The more I talk to people in our community, there's more mental health crisis going on now than I've ever seen in my life. And I think the other place is, in 2008, we went to higher education, and we just had these huge, 10 or 15% tuition growths at UW and our other public universities. We can't make that mistake again. So I think we should definitely be focused on reducing our state workforce in terms of how it grows going forward.
Thanks, Mark. Ingrid, your 30 seconds for rebuttal.
I think cutting the pay of so many middle-class families that are depending on those state jobs is short-sighted. I will not balance the budget on the backs of hardworking people in our district, but I will work hard so that we are spending wisely and not being wasteful with our resources that we have, and respect that is coming from hard-earned money from the constituents.
Thank you. Ken, you want to go first here?
Sure. I mean, one thing to note is that the budget for this biennium has increased 20% over the previous one. So, I mean, our spending increased well beyond growth, inflation, any other kind of reasonable measure. Now, I know we had to deal with some things with McCleary and some other things with the school. We need to prioritize what we want the government to do. And unfortunately, we're going to have to find some cuts in order to balance this budget. And thankfully, mostly because of taxing online purchases, our deficit is going down, and I believe it probably will continue to go down. And I think the problem with austerity previous to 2008 had more to do with the business environment and the uncertainty of the regulatory steps being taken by the federal government, that businesses couldn't grow as fast. Hopefully, we won't make that same mistake, and we'll foster a better environment for businesses to come back stronger, and we will be able to grow ourselves out of this deficit. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Bill, you're up.
Thank you. Yes, we're very lucky, like I say, many people already mentioned that the forecast came out last week that has shown our budget is not near as dire as first predicted. And those forecasts, again, are going to change because they're forecasts. They're not perfect. But we are in an okay space right now, but we're still going to have to look at particularly the out-year budgets. But one thing I'm very proud of, the House Democratic Caucus has made a commitment that we will not balance the budget on those most vulnerable. And that is a group decision that I stand behind absolutely. We cannot afford to cut things to the folks that need it most in this time of COVID crisis. So we must stay with that plan and not do that. So we're going to look at the forecast. Right now, we're probably not going to have a special session because there's enough funding in the rainy day fund to get us through this year. But we definitely have to look at our next year's budget, and that'll be part of next session of what we're going to do. Thank you.
Ken, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, I hope included in those most vulnerable is some kind of attention being paid to small business owners that are teetering right now, that are shut down, that want to get back to work, and the tens of thousands of out of work employees that are ready to go back to work. So, I mean, we have to do something. There has to be attention paid to the business environment, because that's going to be the way we get out of this, is by economic growth. And there's going to have to be some cuts along with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. The next question will start with Mark. The question is, the tax system in Washington State is the most regressive in the country, according to the Institute of Taxation and Economic Policy, with the poorest residents here paying nearly 6 times as much of their income in taxes as the wealthy. The study points out that the lack of a personal income tax and a high reliance on sales tax ensures that inequality will persist until changes are made. What are you prepared to support and vote for to rectify that inequity? Would you support an income tax or a capital gains tax? Mark?
I do not support an income tax or capital gains tax. I think that, I think it goes back and to your core point. When you look at it, you have three legs of that stool. You have the sales tax, you have the B&O, and then you have the property tax. The one that's really regressive is obviously the sales tax. And this has been my challenge in the 8 years I've been in the Senate. People say we want a less regressive tax system, yet I have not seen any proposals that talk about lowering the sales tax. I've seen proposals in Olympia to keep raising the sales tax, and that happens all the time. And so if someone were to say, we're gonna do a capital gains tax, we're gonna take all of that money, we're gonna put it in to reduce the sales tax, and we're gonna lock it into the Constitution, but can't be overdone the following session. Like, I'm open to having that conversation. I think that's a legitimate conversation. But if people think they're gonna make our tax system less regressive just by adding a new tax every 2 years, I disagree with that. When I was elected, my first budget I was involved in helping write in 2013 was a $34 billion state budget. And in 2019, we passed a $52 billion state budget in the Senate that wasn't enough spending. And the final version ended up being closer to $53 billion. So in the 6-year time span, when you have that much growth in state revenue, I think we have to look at spending before we think about creating new taxes.
Ingrid, your thoughts?
So currently, according to our Constitution, income tax is not constitutional. So I don't think it's worth talking about that at the time. That's not where we're at. Where we are at is looking at a possible capital gains tax. What I do know is that my neighbors are getting priced out of this district. It is too expensive for so many hardworking people to live. Seniors are struggling to get by. And I see time and time again, people have been the foundation of our communities are having to leave because they can no longer afford to live here. I do think looking at a capital gains tax and closing corporate loopholes that special interest groups have carved into our tax code for decades now is the most reasonable without putting a burden on regular working people or our middle class families. I think we do need to look at different income, and while it may take a little while to transpire, this is something that we need to have the conversation about now so that we're not having this conversation 2 years from now as well. Thank you.
Mark, you have 30 seconds.
Well, I think the key point there, I think that Ingrid mentioned, is people are being priced out of their homes from property taxes. That's what's pricing them out. And at the end of the day, my big challenge in 2019 session was the suggestion that we undo the entire McCleary deal and remove the lid on local property taxes. And the reason I voted against that was for the exact reason Ingrid mentioned. The seniors came to me and said, we cannot afford that. When you went to Maple Valley, they failed their lid in 2018 at the lower state minimum of $1.50. And so now we passed a bill in 2019 that raised the new property tax limit up to $2.50 from $1.50. And the seniors in Maple Valley are saying to me, we can't afford it. And that's why I didn't vote for that.
Thanks, Mark. Bill, do you need me to repeat the question? And you
No, I'm good. Thank you. Yeah, so what I'm looking for is, I'm not looking for additional tax revenue to fund something, but I think there are some questionable taxes we have that aren't really good for, they're not designed for now to be good working taxes that are progressive. For example, I look at the B&O tax, that business and occupation tax. That is based on your gross revenue. So if you're a business that brings in $500,000 a year, but you spend $700,000 to create that business, you actually have a loss, but you're going to still pay tax on that $500,000 you brought in. It doesn't consider what you're really making. Those kinds of taxes to me are the ones that are not working well. And I'd be very interested in looking at making those work better. And I agree that if we do have that, we could trade out taxes. So trade out a regressive tax such as that doesn't make sense and put in a more progressive tax at revenue neutral, not adding more revenue in, but just changing the tax structure from regressive to progressive. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that all sounds good. The problem is that a number of Democrats from the Seattle area are already proposing new taxes. Frank Chops proposed $2 billion in new taxes. Jamie Peterson has laid out a roadmap to get these taxes passed. And so the Democrat caucus is going to go to Olympia and they're going to attempt to pass new taxes. Representative Ramos votes with the Democrat caucus 98% of the time. It's certainly not my expectation that he's going to go against them when they propose new taxes. And as Senator Mullet said, no one has put on the table any kind of a decrease in sales tax, so that we're talking about a revenue neutral proposal here. So I don't see how this is going to happen in the way that it's being described. It's nice for everybody to talk about this, but I believe the reality in Olympia is going to be something a lot different that the voters of this district just don't support at its core.
Bill, your rebuttal?
Thank you. Yeah, it's continuing to be said that a perception of how I vote, and I vote with my party. Now, of course, I am a Democrat, and I believe in our democratic principles, and so there's a lot there I agree with. But the fifth vote I took in the House when I first got there was the only person voting against something that all of the Democrats voted for. I established very early that I don't just vote for things. I'm not a party puppet, so I wish those terms wouldn't be used. I work across the aisle, as I mentioned, on some very controversial bills, and I've gotten many folks to come and work with me on issues, and I've worked with them on issues. So that's where I am. Thank you.
Right, for this next question, Ken will have the honor of going first. The question is, what concrete steps do you favor for reducing gun violence? Would you support a bill that bans assault rifles and/or limits magazine capacity? Ken?
Yeah, I would not support those bills. First of all, I am endorsed by the National Rifle Association because I support the Second Amendment. I was born and raised in Alaska, where I grew up with a lot of responsible gun owners, and I've never been able to come to grips with how, onerous regulations for their gun ownership made sense when they've done nothing wrong. The other thing is there isn't really any empirical evidence that these types of laws lead to a reduction in gun violence, at least anything that I've seen. They make us feel good, and after we suffer the grave tragedies that we've seen in gun violence. But in the day, I don't believe that they do anything to necessarily make it safer. And we should go ahead and enforce the existing laws on the books to do everything we can to make sure that those types of weapons don't fall into the wrong hands. Thanks.
Bill, your thoughts?
Thank you. I'm a gun owner, and I'm a responsible gun owner, and so are most folks I know. And in 2018, when I knocked on over 14,000 doors, I talked to many responsible gun owners, and their message to me was clear. They are responsible gun owners. They want to be considered that, and they are tired of a few folks doing things that are giving them a bad name, because most folks are. But right now, there's some things happening that scare me. When I walk out of my office in Olympia and I have a bunch of folks standing outside there, fully armed, in camo gear, with all their weapons, staring me in the face, just trying to intimidate. I will go to North Bend to get together on the street to get together with folks and protest things. And these folks walk by fully armed, and it's just an intimidation thing that I think is wrong, and that I don't like. And I would like to put an end to that. Thank you.
Rebuttal, please.
Yeah, I don't know that there's any reason for Representative Ramos to feel threatened by these people. I've been to a number of Back the Blue rallies where people have legally carried their firearms on them. I don't. Again, if that's certainly not the biggest threat. The biggest threat are people in the CHOP and the CHAZ or whatever you want to call it, running around just in an anarchist utopia up there. If they're the ones that are shooting people. And instead, we heard it was the summer of love. So, you know what? That's not the summer of love, and we just ought to leave the law-abiding gun owners alone on this one.
Ingrid, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, thank you. So I too am a gun owner, and I consider myself a responsible gun owner and do support Second Amendment rights. I think one thing that's important to note, though, is if you are a hunter and you need more than 10 bullets to take down an elk, you need to be practicing. You're at the range before you're bringing that out there. Just saying. I Another point, though, is that we have a lot of opportunity to make gun safety a real thing. One thing I see as a healthcare provider is we have a real barrier with how can we help people who are suicidal not having those immediate access to weapons, or if they do have weapons, how do we help secure them temporarily and voluntarily, and help educate that group of people so that they are not at risk. Our suicide deaths from guns are out of control right now, and there's a lot of good things that we can do by bringing responsible gun owners to the table and coming up with solutions together, so that this isn't an ongoing problem. And we also need to look at how can we also keep our schools safer so that we are not at risk from that random person who does have access to a weapon who should not be having that. So there's a lot that we can do without infringing upon the rights of responsible gun owners. Thank you.
Good. Mark, what do you think?
Thanks. I am not a gun owner. I've never actually owned a gun in my life. I've been pretty transparent with Republicans that, I have a lot of agreement with them on business issues, regulation issues, tax issues. I think they've been frustrated that I've supported the gun initiatives we've had on the ballot during the time I've been in the office. That was the background check one originally and the domestic violence one most recently. I think to really, Ann, get to your question, there was a question there on the capacity of magazines. What I have learned, even though I'm not a gun owner, I spend a lot of time listening to people who are gun owners. And there is some possible ground there in the sense, but 10, I definitely learned last session was low. If you were to cap it at a different level, whether that's 15 rounds or 20 rounds, I think you could find people getting to a spot where they're like, okay, that seems like something I might be able to support. I think in this upcoming session, in terms of banning assault weapons, I don't see that being an issue that'll probably get to the finish line. But I think an issue you didn't recommend or you didn't talk about was the training for people with concealed pistol licenses. There's a lot of states like Texas that require that training. And so I think, based on listening to both sides of this argument, I think there is some common ground where you could find a threshold on what the ammunition amount is, but I don't think it's 10. I think it's a higher number. And I think you could definitely have discussions around the training for people with CPL licenses. And I think that's a place that I would think you might be able to move forward.
Mark, Ingrid, your 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Sure. I think looking at training for concealed weapons and such is a great idea. I think we could also make exemptions for people who have prior military experience and people who already have these. But maybe moving for people who are seeking them, maybe we have a higher threshold so that we can make sure people are safe. There's ways that we can do this, and I think that's a great idea to look at.
Thank you all. For the next question, we will start with Bill. The question is, much of the legislative district lies within unincorporated King County, which is seeing its infrastructure budget cut, especially for roads and bridges. Much of the tax base has been annexed into unincorporated areas, leaving fewer people to pay the cost of rural infrastructure. Would you support a change in state statute to address this issue? Bill?
Well, thank you very much. And I really love this question because that's what I led last year in the legislature with. I have in transportation, I ran a local options revenue for transportation. Right now, cities and counties can't fund the transportation issues they have across the state. I've talked to many cities and counties, and they just don't have the funding. And so what I want to do is give them a assortment of various tools they can use to fund their local infrastructure. And that's just so critical for our cities and counties. Example, in the 5th is classic. We have, like you say, the city roads, and then you have mainly county roads connecting them to state roads. And you can't get from one to the other, and people don't know where they cross. So I've been a leader in this. I'm working on a transportation package now with in the transportation committee. This will be a part of it because I took the lead this last year, worked it through a number of committees to get the discussion going so that we can make that change and give cities and counties the options they need to fund transportation. So I'm an avid supporter of doing that. Thank you.
Ken, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you have to do, and I know this has been tried before, is we need to try and get these unincorporated areas, annexed or attached to other jurisdictions, so that then they use their tax base and have the revenue available. I know there's initiatives in the past to try and I still think they should be looked at where the state provides incentives for existing cities to absorb those unincorporated areas, to give them a more stable tax base. And I think those are initiatives and efforts to continue. I'm not sure exactly what Representative Ramos is talking about. I'm not sure where additional revenue for these unincorporated areas or the cities is going to come from. My fear is that, again, we add an additional tax burden, even though I certainly believe in the cause of assisting those cities to upgrade and add to their infrastructure.
Bill, 30 seconds.
Thank you. And the point is to give local authority and local control, where cities and counties can make those decisions for what they need. I know right now there's not one city I can find that says they have enough funding for their transportation to keeping the pavement maintained and doing the overlayments that are needed. There's just not the funding there. And King County doesn't have it. There's no spot there that's going to come to the rescue. So we have to give that local control back. Those city councils and those county councils can make those decisions on what they need best. This would give them the tools to do that. Thank you.
Mark, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I'm good. I think, obviously, my whole hope next session is we have a transportation infrastructure package, a fairly large one. I think we have a unique combination of the most people unemployed that I've ever seen during my time in office. At the same time, we have the lowest interest rates I've ever seen while I've been in office. So I think we should take advantage of that to do a large transportation infrastructure package. Obviously, I think finishing Highway 18 is number one on my list. But I am a huge supporter of this idea that the state, as part of that revenue from the transportation infrastructure package, should send money out to counties that they could use on their unincorporated roads. Because I 100% think this is a huge problem. And I'll tell you, it's a huge problem in the 5th district, because it's not a problem in the Seattle districts. They don't have any unincorporated roads. And, you know, the 6 or 7 ledge districts in Seattle, we've got them all in our district. And so I think if you can make that one of the revenue streams in the transportation package next year, that says, here, county, you're going to get dedicated money, but you have to use it. You have to use it on your unincorporated roads. You can't just have it go into the abyss of your overall transportation budget. I think you should give them money at the specifically earmarked for those roads that have fallen, you know, as we pointed out here, as the cities have incorporated more and more of the unincorporated lands in King County, the counties need help, and I think we should give it to them.
Ingrid, please proceed.
So I don't disagree with Mark. I think he brings up some great points. I live in unincorporated King County right now. And one of the bridges I have to travel over to get anywhere is needing some severe work. And the county is out there all the time working on it. But because of the waters from the river, it's an ongoing issue no matter what we do. So we also need to look at, are we doing the right fixes that are sustainable and ones that we don't have to fix after a year, so that we're wise with our money? But I do think it's important that we look at support our county, especially in the 5th. And I will absolutely advocate for that at a state level. Thanks.
I'll give you 30 seconds back if we agree. We don't have to.
Fair enough. Okay, next question is about school transformation. Schools, this question, we'll start with Ingrid on this one. Schools face enormous challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic, including a complete transformation of their educational delivery model and systems. What should the state do to support this transformation?
So this is something I am learning about, as my son just started kindergarten virtually. It's not the kindergarten we had hoped for. And it is a huge struggle, as both my husband and I are healthcare providers. So we don't have the luxury of working from home. So this has been a real big issue with us. And how do we manage working while trying to teach our son kindergarten virtually? And how much is he really getting from that? I have been very impressed with my current school district and that they are delivering and the education they're delivering. But what we really have to do in order to get on top of this is we have to have a stronger pandemic response through our state. And in order to do that, we need to look at having better access to 24-hour testing. We need to look at better contact tracing so that we can get our numbers down low enough where we can start going physically back to school without infecting our whole communities over again. Thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the big reasons I was pushing so hard for a special session, you know, over the summer, is I really thought the legislature our responsibility was provide the financial resources, whatever flexibility the districts needed, so they could at least get the most, the kids who the online learning environment's the hardest for. I think, like Ingrid's son's example, kindergarten, first graders, I think, we want to get them in the classroom. People, special education plans should definitely be in the classroom. English language learners should definitely be in the classroom. So I think in an ideal situation, we would have started school the first week of September with the state providing the resources financially and the flexibility to enable every district in our state to try to at least start off with that sort of level. And then based on how, we deal with cases from the pandemic, county by county, you can decide whether you can move past that stage to additional stages. And I really think it was a missed opportunity not doing a special session to do that. We left it up every district, but we didn't give them the extra resources, and we didn't give them the extra legislative guidance of ways they could get it done. And I think if we get into session and we still haven't made progress on this issue, that should be our very first focus, the very first week of session in January, is making sure we provide whatever resources are necessary to get these kids back in the classroom. But I will say my experience, I have 6 kids, I think I have the record of the most in the system right now. Their teachers are actually doing an awesome job given they've been dealt. I couldn't be more impressed, but they are really working their ass off to do what they can.
You have another 30 seconds.
So yeah, I do think we do need to look at equity and what our most vulnerable students are, who they are, and try to get them back in priority, like Mark said. So I do support that concept, but we also have to make sure to keep our community safe and give the teachers the proper supplies and make sure that we're not forcing people who have compromised immune systems to go into these classrooms with 5 and 6-year-olds who will be touching everything. Right. So I do support Mark in looking at the most vulnerable population. So as we're phasing in.
Ken, you're up. Do you want me to repeat the question?
No, I'm good. Yeah, I mean, I've been a big advocate of getting our kids back in the classroom as soon as it's safe and healthy to do so. I don't know that we need to transform education as we know it. We just need an understanding of when it's possible to return to in-person learning, which is the optimum environment for our children to learn. Aside from not calling the special session to have our elected representatives deal with this issue, the governor didn't even include going back to school in his 4 phases of reopening at all. If education is the paramount duty, where's the plan? And now that the health department's put out a plan, and a plan that I think is reasonable, now we have school districts talking about opening. Now labor and industries is stepping in and saying, no, gotta have these N95 masks. So even when we're getting ready to get kindergartners, first graders, special ed kids back in, now the governor's moving the goalposts again. And the fact of the matter is nobody has any certainty, and this is harming our children. And as the numbers go down, there's going to be a bigger push to get them back in the classroom, which I think the district needs to be at the forefront, and they need to push it as hard as they can.
Thanks, Ken. What do you think, Bill?
Thank you. Here we're interesting because, our school districts have the authority and control to decide what's best for them, which is good at the local level. The state has to provide that funding. And so we have to continue to provide that, as someone mentioned, with flexibility so they can do the best job they can in this tough situation. That's just, where we are. But I do agree they are doing as good a job as possible. You have to bring in that equity and access issue as well, because the other issue that comes to this is currently when you're not all there is the broadband and access to that. Now, some people think that's only a problem in Eastern Washington. It is a problem in the 5th district. I have people that live 2 miles from where I do, and they're never going to have broadband. The 5th district has the rural part, and we have areas that don't have access to broadband. And there's many students that don't have access that need that. So we have to always work on that equity part as best we can, and provide the child care with education. And it just goes on and on. We have to give those local districts the authority to do what they need to do, and we need to provide the funding for them to do it.
Okay, you have 30 seconds. Rebuttal?
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice if the individual districts had the ability to choose when they went back to school based on the guidelines set out by the Department of Health, but they don't. Tacoma was ready to go to school a week ago, and they had everything all set up, and then L&I stepped in, told them they couldn't do it. So, we're going to see kind of a hodgepodge of districts trying to open in different manners. And, if they don't have any kind of consistency from the state on when they can open, who knows when we're going to open? And I agree, the teachers are doing a great job. Both of my daughters are doing well with the online learning, but I want them back in class.
Thank you all. This is our last question from us. Our country is, we'll start with Bill in the House and Mark for the Senate. Our country is so divided. Can you, in 1 minute, give us an example of something you've accomplished while working with an individual or group with whom you had significant differences? Bill?
Yes, thank you. That question. I have proof of the work I've done across the aisle. Last session, I passed a carbon sequestration bill. Now, talking about carbon, you immediately start talking about something that's controversial and very partisan. And I worked on that bill to take advantage of our forests and our agriculture, our great state, the natural resources we have to help reduce our carbon footprint. And it was very controversial at the start, but I brought everyone together from all aspects, from forest management folks to environmental groups, loggers, and we worked on that bill, put it together, and when we brought it to the House floor for a vote, it was a unanimous vote. And think about the extremes in our political structure right now, from one extreme in either party to the other extreme in the other party. Tell me anyone who can vote to unanimous carbon issue, and that's something that I'm really proud of, bringing everybody together. That was not easy. There were some lot of hard conversations, and we worked really hard to get there, but we did. And that's how an example of how I like to get things done, by working with everybody. Thank you.
Ken, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not a politician, so I haven't had a chance to reach across the aisle, but I can tell you that I've worked with a lot of different groups, especially in my volunteer work and my nonprofit work. As a board member on the Scleroderma Foundation, I work with a lot of people who I know for a fact probably don't agree with me politically, and we're able to come together in common cause to support education and research for this debilitating chronic illness, this autoimmune disease, the scleroderma, which my late wife passed away from, and actually started this chapter. And so it's kind of become a mission, a way to carry on her memory. And in order to accomplish that mission, I'm willing to sit down with anybody to hopefully eradicate this brutal disease one day. Thanks.
Bill, 2 seconds.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And again, just examples of working across the aisle, which you always do. I was working on a bill the other day that we needed an amendment on, and the Republican member said, "Hey, I'm working on this amendment." We sat down and said, "Well, you do this one, I'll do this one. Let's put it together. Let's just make this one." We sat down, we did it, and we put that in together as a way to get a bill, make it a little better, work together, and bring some different voices to it. So I'll continue to do that and work with everyone who has interest in making our district a better place and making our state a better place. That's the goal. It's not partisanship. It's what we're going to do to make our district and our state a better place. Thank you.
Mark, you want to give us your best 60 seconds on something you've accomplished?
I think one of the big issues that's come to the committee, as I've always served on, is landlord-tenant issues. And the first few years I was in Olympia, the tenants would bring forward their bills, the landlords would bring forward their bills. Everything would die because they were just yelling and screaming at each other the whole time. And nobody was actually, getting a chance to listen to what the sides were saying to see where the common ground would be. The second I got put into a leadership position on that committee, I brought the groups together, the landlords and the tenants. This is like Hatfields and McCoys. And the first thing we figured out in joint was this idea of portable screening reports. So when you go out to find an apartment, instead of having to pay $35 for a screening report every time, you do one common report. You can show it to every apartment complex. And we got that through with both sides supporting the issue. The second big one was source of income discrimination. That was a huge problem. This bill we had in the last 10 years, and the idea was everyone has to take Section 8 vouchers. But when I was listening to landlords, I discovered that their fear was the damage to the units would be on their shoulders to fix. So we created a fund for the landlords that if they rent to a Section 8 tenant and their unit is damaged, the state pays to help fix that unit. So I think in this situation right now in the landlord-tenant space, I'm the only person in the entire state who's endorsed by the Low Income Housing Alliance and the landlord groups simultaneously at the same time. And I think it's because I listen to them and figure out the common ground.
Thanks, Mark. Ingrid?
So I too am not a politician, I'm a nurse. So my experience is in the healthcare realm. I think something that I have seen time and time again is the deep structural flaws in our healthcare system. And that's something I've had to go to bat against my own hospital for, under threat of sometimes or concern of losing my job. But I think it's so important to come to the table and have those hard conversations. One thing I have found time and time again is if you're persistent and you're an advocate and you have good information, and you're willing to listen, people will be willing to come and work with you if you approach it correctly. So the hospital often has this approach of making sure that they're fiscally viable, which is important because they are too a business. And we as nurses want to go ahead and make sure that we're delivering the best quality care without any negative impacts to our patients. So trying to come together and find common ground is something I have done for many years with my own hospital to help draft policy and how we deliver our care. And while we don't always see eye to eye at the beginning, eventually we come around and we work together to make sure that we deliver amazing care for our community. I hope to bring that experience to Olympia as well. Thank you.
Mark, you have another second.
I'll give you your 30 seconds back. I think it seems like a rebuttal one. Thanks. You're muted, Ann. You muted yourself. I don't know how.
Sorry. Okay. For the last round, each candidate will ask their opponent a question. Mark, please begin with your question for Ingrid.
Well, I guess I'm curious. These campaigns are so crazy, right? I don't think anyone understands what they're like until you've lived through one. I don't know. I'm just curious, like, what's been the part of it that's been the most unexpected for you? Like, what's been the biggest curveball when you think about the things that you thought, oh my God, I never thought this would be part of the process? I don't know. That's it.
I think some of the things I had expected, but some of them I didn't understand that would happen. So I think what's really hard is when you hear things, people make assumptions about you that may not be completely accurate. Also, I did not expect to be a nurse during a pandemic, which added a whole nother level of difficulty to my family and my work life on top of this. So that's probably been the biggest stressor for us and my family, was how do we survive some of the impact that we've seen at the hospital, and how do we cope with that while still fighting for our community? Thank you.
Thank you both. Ingrid, your question for Mark, please.
Sure. So Mark, you're running as a Democrat. You've served our district for 8 years, and I just want to say thank you for your service. I also want to ask you a question. So as we're looking at the budget and everything, I know you've been pushing for a special session, and I do hear a lot about an austerity wages and undermining contracts for workers. Yet you're also one of the top recipients of corporate PAC money. So what I want to know is there a place where you would break with corporate interests on revenue or loopholes to help relieve the burden on our community?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think the fossil fuel industry is where I would start with from last year, where, you know, someone donates my campaign, that has no impact whatsoever on how I vote. I honestly think that's why some of the special interest groups want me out of there, is because I don't get influenced by campaign donations. And I think that if you were to look, like one example is the net pen bill. You know, Cook Aquaculture donated my campaign. They didn't want the net pens banned when they were, you know, the big outbreak of salmon from the net pens in the Puget Sound. When that bill came up, I voted for it. It was completely against the people in my campaign. Last year in the fossil fuel, we had a bill around raising the price on a barrel of oil to fund hazardous substance cleanup. It was a MACA bill, Model Hazardous Substance Control Act. For that bill, and it, I think, was the right bill to vote for. It was 100% opposed by everyone in the fossil fuel industry. When we went to goals, they said, hey, I was the co-sponsor on a bill to lower prescription drug costs last year. We ended up passing the June Robinson version of the bill in the House. This was opposed by the entire pharmaceutical industry. And so I think my point is people support my campaign because I listen to both sides of an argument. That's what I do. And there's people in Olympia who don't listen to both sides. So if you're someone willing to give everyone a chance to tell their story, even though you don't agree with them all the time, they will support your campaign just because they know you're going to give them a fair shot to explain
their side of the story.
Thank you both. For the next question, Bill, do you have one for Ken?
Yes, thank you. As we talk about at these forums, we talk fairly much in general concepts. You have a minute to answer. You can't solve the problems of the world in a minute. But I'm interested. You said you want to make some changes and very specific ideas. I want to know what specific legislation you have ready to go. I'll let the category of it be totally up to you. But what, with specific details, is something you have ready to go that you want to make a change in January?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, again, I'm not in the legislature. I don't have any staff. I'm busy running my companies right now. So I don't have any legislation ready to go. I have some ideas. I have good advisors. And my primary focus, as you know, Bill, has been on how we reopen this economy and rebuild it so we can grow back as before and even better so we can get people to work. I've talked about a number of policies, including looking at potentially temporarily waiving some licensing requirements so that we can have more people get into business. I've talked about temporary holidays for B&O tax to help small businesses get back on their feet. I've talked about increasing the small business tax credit for B&O. So I've talked about a number of specific things that I think are part of an overall package that we need to do to foster an economic environment that's going to get the economy growing again.
Thanks. And lastly, your question for Bill.
Yep. Bill, I'm hoping you can clear a little bit of confusion for me and for some of the other voters in the field. According to the campaign website, you've endorsed him for his Senate reelection. Yet, when I look at your website and Ms. Anderson's website, I'm trying to have the same groups that are funding your campaigns and endorsing your campaigns. And so I'm kind of wondering, and even the governor now has stepped into the fray and endorsing Ms. Anderson for the Senate seat. So what I'm trying to clear up is, do you still stand behind your endorsement for the reelection of Senator Mullet? And if so, do you believe the governor erred in jumping into this race and making an endorsement for his opponent?
Thank you for that question. And yes, I stand behind my endorsement of Mark Mullet. I've been working with him for a couple of years now. It's face to face with my seatmate, also Lisa Callan. We are a heck of a team. We've got a lot of things done for our district, working on in the House side together and working with Mark there. He's got the experience and know how to get things done. We work things here. We ask for help in the Senate side and vice versa. We go back and forth, and we have a really good team that we're working with. And so I do support endorsing him and look forward to working with him. Also, I got to know her a little bit over time. Whoever wins, that's who's going to win, and I'll work with her. But that's the choice, and I made my choice, and I'm very proud to stick with it.
Thank you for those questions. Candidate now has 1 minute for closing remarks. We started this event with Ingrid, so let's go backward, starting with Lisa, then Bill, Ken, Mark, and Ingrid.
Thank you. Thank you for the great dialogue and the questions, and just making sure that the issues that we're facing today are really out here for us to talk about and be on the table. Even though I didn't get to answer them because I'm running unopposed, I think knocked my table here. I think it's very important that you understand and the voters get to hear directly about the issues that are in front of us and what we need to accomplish. I've been spending my time in the legislature making sure that we have healthy families, healthy youth, healthy communities. And if you look at my bills that I've passed in a bipartisan way, the majority of them are bipartisan, wanting to make sure that we're giving every individual in the 5th, every individual in the state, their best chance to thrive. And I think that that's exactly what we need to do. There's a saying out here right now that it is what it is. And what I fought on and fought for before COVID and will continue to do to make sure that it is what it needs to be and what it has to be for everyone to thrive. So thanks for the opportunity to listen deeply. And please don't ever hesitate to reach out to me so that I can hear directly from you on what your issues are and what your concerns are. You can go to lisacallan.org or you can call me on my cell phone at 260-4878. Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. Bill?
Thank you. Thank you all for having this forum. It's a great way to get out to the public information. You know, this year with COVID, it's much harder to do that. 2 years ago, I knocked on over 14,000 doors trying to meet with folks, talk with them, get a feel for what they care about. And this district is so varied. It's one, I think, unique ones in the state. Having, being in King County, which everybody thinks of as Seattle, but we're out here in the rural parts. We go all the way up to Snoqualmie Pass, and very diverse district. And to listen to everybody, you have to know this district. You can't live in one town. All the way down to Enumclaw, up to Duval, all these cities that we have a part of. Some people don't even know there's a precinct in Renton. We have a little bit of Renton in our district, but that rural part of it, to bring together with our small cities and get them working together, critical piece. You talked about the county roads we need to work on together. It's bringing all this together, working with folks, listening to them, and getting to solutions and improvements that are good for our district and for the state. And that's what I have to do, and I hope to continue doing it. Thank you all for taking your time to come tonight. It's been a pleasure being with you.
Ken, your closing remarks, please.
Yep. Yeah, again, I would like to add my thanks to the organizers for this event, as well as the people that have made it through the hour with us. Hopefully you found it enlightening and constructive. I just want to remind everybody again that you have real choice in this election. And if you think that state government is being run well and is headed in the right direction, I mean, these are all good people here. I have nothing personal or no animus towards them. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has kind of shown us some of the weaknesses of one-size-fits-all state government, whether it's picking winners or losers in the economy, whether it's moving the goalposts on getting our kids back to school, whether it was just what I consider the sheer incompetence of not bringing the legislature back in session so that you voters had an opportunity to understand how the current legislature was going to deal with this issue. I believe it's time for a change. I think we need it now. I fear that if we don't get the balance, if we don't get the firewall in Olympia against some policies that we're going to see coming from the Seattle wing of the Democrat caucus, I think we may lose our chance to be able to stop a lot of those. And so I hope that you will vote for me and get more information at kenmoninski.com. I have a number of videos up, as well as further information about my campaign. And I thank you all for attention this evening.
Mark, your closing remarks, please.
Thanks. I don't think people always understand there's 3 budgets in Olympia. Only one of them can be passed on a party line vote. That's the operating budget. The state construction budget and transportation packages that involve bonding have to be passed in bipartisan votes, because if you're going to borrow money, you need 60%, and no party has 60%. The reason I think I've been successful is because I have cordial, positive working relationships with people on the far left of the political spectrum and people on the far right of the political spectrum. Like, I give Phil Fortunato a ride home a lot of times because on my way back from Olympia to Issaquah at night, and we are at the opposite ends of the political spectrum, Senator Fortunato and myself. But I think by having positive, cordial working relationships and being to sit down with and listen to Republicans and Democrats on all the issues is the reason we've had successful transportation funding in our district. It's a reason we've had successful construction projects funded in our district. And I plan to do just that going forward. I always say, just because you can pass a bill on a party line vote doesn't mean you should pass a bill on a party line vote. Even if picking up 3 Republican votes doesn't change anything in terms of whether the bill passes or not, it usually always makes it better legislation that's going to last through the test of time. When we did, the paid family leave policy in 2017, we did it with Democrats and Republicans, and there was buy-in from both parties. That's a good bill. I'm confident that bill will stay in our books for a long time. So my commitment is to always work in a bipartisan manner. Thank you very much.
Ingrid, your closing remarks, please.
Hi, thanks. So I'm running for office because I believe we have the opportunity to have a leadership who's advocating for our community. We are in an unprecedented time right now, dealing with a pandemic that has shaken our community to the core. Currently, there is no nurse in our state Senate at a time where we're trying to develop a robust statewide pandemic response plan. We need somebody at the table who will be able to help guide legislation so it can deliver meaningful results and improved outcomes. Without a strong public health approach, our economic recovery will be delayed. We will also unnecessarily lose lives. This race gives us the opportunity to elect a candidate who is not beholden to corporations, but the people of the Fifth. I'm the only candidate in this race who has refused to take any money from major corporations, banks, predatory lenders, pharmaceutical companies, fossil fuel companies, and insurance companies. And I do this because I want to be crystal clear who I am running for, and that's for the people. It would be my honor to serve you in Olympia next year as your state senator. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Connie, I'll turn it back to you.
Connie, you're muted.
Thank you all so much. What an impressive group of people. Thank you so much for your service, for your interest in serving your community, for your citizenship. It's much appreciated. The Cable TV Commission and the staff have recorded tonight's forum and will replay it every day until the November 3rd election on Issaquah City 21. You can also watch this event anytime on the YouTube channel for the City of Issaquah. Please tell your friends to tune in, and so they too can become more informed voters. Thank you very much, audience, for tuning in tonight. Thank you, and thank you, candidates.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tim.